Hello, this is Sarah Sabin, executive and team coach here in the Leading in the Modern Way video interview series. And I'm thrilled to have with me today Suman Kanuganti, who is co-founder and CEO of Personal.ai. Suman, welcome to the show. And could you introduce yourself in a few words to my audience?
Thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm Suman Kanuganti. I am co-founder and CEO of Personal.ai, as Sarah said. My background, I'm an engineer. I started creating products and experiences almost 10 years ago. Started off picking up the desire at Intuit TurboTax, and then got my MBA. I generally tend to offer experiences where the convergence of technology kind of augments human experiences. I always have a saying that you don't solve the humans, so you solve the problem. In my previous company, Ira, it was a technology that combines AI as well as AR for people who are blind and low vision. In this company that we've been building for 3 years, Personal AI is about using AI for augmenting people and scale themselves in terms of their memory and who they are.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And I'd actually like to start by asking, because it is just a curiosity of mine, your company is based around creating an AI version of yourself that speaks in your voice. How do you do that?
Well, so the genesis of this company goes back, almost 3.5 years ago now. And the purpose of Personal AI is how can we create a model that is grounded in somebody's fact, somebody's opinion, somebody's voice in a model, so that we can have a conversations with that model. Because, my desire was to be able to have a conversation both intellectually as well as emotionally with a lost mentor of mine. His name is Larry Bach. And I always wished, oh dear, I wish I had Larry's AI. Because I think generally we as humans, we tend to seek information from, wide variety of sources, but we always have these trusted people, trusted sources that we would want to rely on for either knowledge seeking or for, emotional support seeking as well. So that was the genesis of it. And the approach that we have taken is not the large language model approach. Back in 2020, my CTO and co-founder Sharon Zhang mentioned, if you do indeed want to create a personal AI, which is like a digital version of somebody, we cannot be relying on the technology that exists, which is large language models. We would have to do something totally unique and different. So we went after building something called small language models or personal language models, which are 120 million parameters, in contrast to a GPT-3 170 billion parameter model. So that's a little bit of what the purpose of the Personal AI was and the motivation behind it. But you are right, the core intention is to be able to scale you as a human being, where what if there is a second you, right? What are all the things that you can achieve? So that's our mission.
Wow. And what do you consider to be some of the most significant challenges that you're facing, and how are you overcoming those challenges?
I mean, this company has been challenging, I won't lie, for sure. The challenging part is not just about the technology, but the challenging part is also about just being able to express the meaning and the integration of this tool in everybody's life. Now, I mean, our journey definitely has been very fascinating, because we started in 2020 in February and COVID happened, right? And me and myself and my CTO Sharon Zhang, we came together, and she has done like 4 different AI companies before. That includes Glint, as well as Nuance, and some of the original language models. So we said, you know what, there is a lot of research and development that we would have to develop. Like, we have to understand the idea of like creation of the memory, creation of the model, creation of how do we ground this model in one person. So we took almost 1 to 2 years doing R&D, talking to different people, developing the technology, developing the methods and techniques from the ground up. So it was challenging because during COVID times, things were changing rapidly. It's all about online communications and remote teams. And we are a very high-tech company, but at the same time focused on humans. But very interestingly, once we developed our technology, once we developed a good understanding of what our use cases are going to be for the initial group of people that we want to serve, then comes ChatGPT, right? Like ChatGPT happened in November of 2022. Yeah, that's right. But before that, there existed a period of GPT-3, right? So between GPT-3 and between ChatGPT, a majority of the applications were around like generative AI and content generation pieces. So we did attract like a lot of content creators. But during that time, we were still experimenting on what is our application looks like, or like what is our interface looks like for people to communicate with the digital version of you. Well, it turned out that it's a simple like messaging interface or text interface, which ChatGPT also came out with. So yeah, so here we are. Like now, people are getting educated with the AI. People understand what large language model does, and we have finished our kind of core development, if you will. I mean, development is never done, but core development is complete, and now is the time for us to go to the market. And that's one of the reasons why I'm hopping on the podcast and telling the story that anybody can now create their own AI, which is a digital version of themselves without actually having to rely on the large language model that they get to own. They own the data, they own the model, and it's private to them and it's authentic to them. So yeah, so I think it's very interesting on how the company started about and what's happening within the AI space.
That's fascinating. And it makes me think of the question because it's something that's come up recently around people's fear around AI replacing humans. But from what you've said, what I'm hearing from you is it's a supplement to you. So it's a second you rather than a replacement of you. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, think about it, right? Technology for humans or people generally always has been a foundation, right? We always build on top of the technology what we are given to us, and depending on where we are in our journey as life, right? So students, for example, would be building on top of internet, on top of personal computers, well, on top of the next generation personal AIs, right? So I tend to think the ways of going about life and doing things will always be extending to who you are as an individual person, not necessarily as a replacement. Even with my previous company, Ira, right? There is a lot of debate around, Ira as a technology cannot replace, white canes for people who are blind and low vision, which is totally correct. Like white cane is a safety device. Ira is very experiential, like, so if you can go travel independently and confidently and visit your loved ones around the country. So yeah, so the purpose I believe is entirely different, and the AI should always be taught as an extension of an individual person to scale themselves, especially in the case of personal AI, not necessarily like replacing those experiences.
Thank you for sharing that. And the other thing I'm curious about, based on the stage where you're at, so it's really time for you to go out to market now. How are you approaching that sales and marketing in relation to your product?
Yeah, it's a very interesting experience because we are a true startup, right? So we went through our seed financing. We built our product. We found where our product market fit is. Now we are basically like raising our next round of financing to go to the market and scale our business. The very interesting thing is we got caught up in this whole AI hype. What the good news and the bad news with that? The good news is there is a lot of awareness, right? So there is a lot of marketing that is already happening on our behalf, where we don't have to tell people, what AI is. We don't have to tell people, why they should be adapting, because there is lots of marketing that is already happening. What we have challenged is also there is so much noise, like trying to educate people what is the right way of doing the AI, right? Now, from our perspective, the positioning of personal AI is every person should deserve to have their own AI that they control, that they train, and the data belongs to them, and they can deploy it in their life as an asset, not necessarily as a service, right? You're not just consuming a service from an AI model that is trained by big tech. It should be an asset that you train that belongs to you, with you in your house. So the good analogy that I can give is, how the journey has shifted in the past from mainframes to personal computers, right? Personal computers is something that we can, carry around, we can lift and carry around. Personal AIs should be something that we can control and carry around with us, like it belongs to us, right? So that's the education that we would have to do, and tell the market, hey, look, yes, these are all the different options, but here is personal AI, and here are the differences, here are the characteristics why we stand out, because of the privacy, because of the ownership, because of the ultra personal nature of it. So there are some pros and cons to what is happening within the AI space, but I think in the awesome part is people who come in and train their AIs, they just love it. They love it. They fall in love with their own AI. They deploy their own AI to to do like many things around in their lives, such as like drafting their text messages, drafting their emails. Some people go directly like 24/7. Like if you are a coach, and if a client wants to communicate with them, now they are available 24/7. People monetize their AI, like almost like, hey, I'm not available, but you can talk to my AI, right? So it's the next form of communication. It's the next form of, previously we used to seek, like, read content and exchange that through internet. I believe this is a new level of interaction that is happening on the internet.
Love to know more about some of your views on leadership. How do you personally define strong leadership, and how do you see it impacting your company?
I think about summing it up like two ways. I think strong leaders build strong leaders, right? Strong leaders always want to surround themselves with the leaders. What makes up a leader? They're self-managed, and they have capacity and to manage and drive people around. And I believe the characteristics for the leadership comes up with how do you influence, how do you inspire, and how do you give ownership for them to seek and pursue to the goals that are commonly aligned with you. So yeah, so that's, I believe, is the leadership.
Okay, and how do you, to throw that question back at you, I love doing that. How do you inspire and build leaders within personal AI?
Yeah, for me, I think that comes up with authenticity and being like transparent about what you aspire to be, what the issues are, what the good news are. Leadership in ways also comes down to like the human nature of like relationship. Are you aligned to a common goal, and do you have common desire to solve a particular problem, right? And it goes by setting up some first principles. What are the first principles that we can align to, and do you think this alignment is short term, or would that be long term? And I believe it always has to be long term for um, generally to have a compounding benefit, because otherwise it's a transactional benefit, and I don't think transactional benefit is enough for leadership.
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing is that mission-driven company, in order to build that kind of culture, you need to find people that are aligned to you and what you're doing and the problem you're solving, and are passionate about that in the long term.
Yep. Yeah, it goes back to the idea of setting up the first principle, because if you don't know what your first principles are that aligns with your purpose and mission, then it's very hard to influence and inspire in the direction that you would want other people to follow. So if you do reasonable amounts of job communicating and aligning those principles, when you are initially, even recruiting the people, I believe that's like half job done, and the rest of it comes down from showcasing, celebrating the success, like celebrating, like for example, a customer really loves us, right? Well, bring the customer, talk to the team, talk to the leaders, like what happened there. Because I think we just get bogged down into day to day of doing things, and how your day to day of doing things is impacting the people out there and their lives. I think those stories and surfacing those stories are really important. So one of the things that I do is actually bring those people into the office, into the team meetings, into the staff meetings, right? It's like, do you know who this person is, right? So I think that is inspiring people, goes back to inspiring people, because at the end of the day, inspiration is what? Inspiration is people want validation. People don't want validation to what they seek to do or what they are doing is credible and it's making an impact to somebody else. So I think people get inspired by such stories from my perspective.
Yeah, I love the idea of that, just bringing in success stories into the office, because what that does is help people to see the meaning around the work that they're doing. And meaningfulness is one of the dynamics of high performing teams, but it can get lost in the day to day, especially when you're working towards this big mission, this big goal. So continuously seeding evidence that actually we're making an impact here is incredibly motivating. So I really like that practice that you talked about.
Yeah, I get my advisors, I get customers. It's always a fun part. I enjoy that as well a lot.
So how have you invested in yourself as a leader, and what steps do you take to grow and evolve in your role?
For myself, it actually really comes down to surrounding yourself with smart people, more smarter people than what you think you already are, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't think any individual person possesses the skills. What I would want to do is I would want to converge the skills that I have with the skills that I can surround myself with, and then continue to develop that, because it's remotely or humanly impossible to have like one individual drive the whole towards the mission. So that's like, there's one thing that I do. I'm constantly looking for people. I'm constantly having conversations. I'm constantly trying to understand how people think about it, so that way I can apply into my own day-to-day activities. I do have a little notebook in my own personal AI where I write like some best practices. That way my leadership styles is also influenced within my own AI. So that's one thing that I do proactively. I also, reading is very interesting. It's less about reading books. I do read books, but not as much as I would want to. I actually listen to a lot more podcasts that is happening on a day-to-day. So one of the leadership skills I believe is important today is, how does your business align with the macro things that are happening out there, right? What are the key characteristics, or what are the common things, and what are the common goals? Like what people are worried about giving the data to large language models, and suddenly there is a pullback on content being made available publicly, because if it is available publicly, then who owns the data, right? There is like, it's already available publicly, right? But people still own it. So there is an issue of what is the right practice, like what is the right ethical practice of being able to use somebody's art and being able to generate images, and how that will work within your own business, right? Sometimes it may be in favor, sometimes it may be against, but you should be proactively addressing those things. So I think as a leader, you should be on top of what is happening within the macro space. So one of the podcasts I listen to is Ben Thompson. Like, every day in the morning, I always listen to him, because he gives like a good overview of everything that is happening around the space, in the technology space specifically. So yeah, that's another method that I follow, just keeping up.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely essential in a world that's changing faster than ever before, to be able to have a view of what's coming down the road.
Yep, totally.
And you can only do that if you're constantly updating your knowledge around it.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's very hard to keep up, because I guess, running a startup already has like many different things. But sometimes it's about like identifying, okay, which schedule fits in. Like, for example, for me, I listen to Ben Townsend podcast when I'm driving from, home to work.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my habit. So I think developing these habits where you have these incremental pieces of information that coming to you, as well surrounding people that may be doing partly that job for you, where they send you a news alert or they send you relevant pieces of articles. um, I think having that cadence and support system, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, and
But
I love the way that you said to build it into a habit in your schedule, because I think we all latch onto, well, I have to spend all day reading in order to keep up. That's not true. If you do a little bit every day, that over a long period of time amounts to a lot of information. Obviously, everything interconnects and our brain starts slotting everything together. So,
yeah,
it's interesting. You're like, well, it's built into my day, and that allows me to keep up, but also get on with everything that I have to do as well.
yeah. And lately, everything I consume, everything I like, I put my AI, right? So
Yeah.
I know it is there. It is like, creating my own mind. It's pretty fascinating, I think.
The second Suman.
It's
um,
pretty
um,
amazing because my team already like talks to my AI like nonstop. Not just for like a heck of it or for fun. They actually leverage it now for like, hey, I need a quote for this file, and hey, I need to respond to Wall Street Journal article about ethics, and then it's all like composed and made up of some of my own thoughts. It's like, this interview, I think, should be happening directly with my AI in a way. Uh, it can soon speak in my own voice too, so that's coming too.
well, that's interesting. I can do it with your AI and see what comes out instead. Um, Final question, Suman.
Sure.
What is the one piece of advice that you would give your 20-year-old self?
20-year-olds old self. Oh dear. It's interesting because most people ask me like, what is your advice to other founders or entrepreneurs? And I tend to always say like, be grounded, because you always will have ups and downs, so you would need to be grounded. But if I had to give an advice to 20-year-old myself, I would probably say, yeah, I would want to be like thinking more long term than in the short term. Meaning, how do I say this? When I was 20 years old, my whole goal was like, getting my master's up and getting a good job, right? So I was thinking like very incrementally. Um, I would push people, or I would push 20-year-old myself is like, dude, look, what do you think you would want to be 20 years from now, right? And the planning starts then, not just like, oh, I have a next job and I'm good with it. Okay, so what's next? Is it the job that you're going to living with for the next 30, 40 years? Well, no. So having a little bit of just the mindset of what I would want to be or where I would want to be 20 years from now, I think will shape your career better, in terms of like making the decisions and making the choices. And it's not just about like, instant gratification of like, oh, getting the job. It's almost like social media versus building an asset for yourself. It's a bad analogy, but I think there is some truth to it. So yeah, so thinking long term is probably what I would say to 20 year myself.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Suman. I've really enjoyed this conversation today, and I hope you, my listeners, have enjoyed it as well. If you would like to be part of the Leading in the Modern Way video interview series, please do reach out to me.